Hey everyone, my name's Gunther and welcome back to Oasis Zoo. Today we're finally tackling a giraffe exhibit, and I gotta say giraffe exhibits are quite large and I have a newfound respect for large exhibit builders. I don't think it's an easy task to take on, and I think it showed here. I went in with this a vision. I went in with a vision, that was the goal, and the vision didn't really survive. And I think that's normal, as they say, most things don't survive first contact. And that's what happened here, but we made it work. And you're gonna see, I picked up some tips and tricks. One of them was to use kind of terrain paint just to kind of map out where we wanted to go. And I really wanted to utilize a rock wall here. And the idea behind it was that we would have this amazing rock wall that would kind of act as a natural barrier for our overall exhibit species. Giraffes are the largest animal in the animal kingdom. They're the tallest, not the largest. That's incorrect. But they do stand at a whopping 18 feet for males and then 16 feet for females. So that's quite large. So we needed to make sure that we had some room because we need to protect our guests, and we need to protect the giraffes, of course, as well. We don't necessarily want giraffes and guests intermingling as much as maybe some people would love to, because they are quite majestic when it comes to animals. So we built this lowered pit at the very front, and then we kind of worked our way back up in more of a staggered approach. Now we did kind of go back with the same idea of utilizing these concrete barriers. Now I will say a struggle that I did have, and you're going to see it here, is I couldn't get the world access to work. So I had to kind of figure that out, and really what I ended up doing was relying on one of the grid pieces, just set that own axis and then kind of work from there. Meant that the piece was a little bit larger than I think I ever intended it to be, but it still worked, and I'm quite happy about that because the overall build definitely took shape. Now I'm going to let you know the build that you see right here, there is going to be some minor changes to it, the finished product. And part of that is I actually left. I went on a short vacation and I came back and I had a bout of inspiration. I had some new ideas that I wanted to really work with, and this is the result. And I'm quite happy with the finished product. Now, hopefully you guys are as well. And hopefully you learn something, because this has always been a goal of mine, which is to just learn new things. And speaking of learning new things, let's talk about rock walls for a second. I think it's very evident that one of my weak points is building rock walls. We've seen quite a few iterations. I think we've improved over time, but just maybe not where we wanted to be. That being said, I took some time to look up some tutorial videos on building better rock walls, and I stumbled across one, and I think this video came out about 2 years ago, but the tips and the tricks were just mind-boggling. And I gotta say, the work that this YouTuber put into it is a fantastic. The level of detail that she puts into her rock walls is just I can't even begin to fathom how we got there. That being said, I took away some key tricks, and the first one is to utilize our chisel and build up a terrain wall, and then work from the terrain wall, add in a little bit of depth using the roughen tool, and then have everything set as a line to surface, and then place some things against the surface, and this will provide our background. On top of that, number two is to use terrain paint and paint your terrain rock. And I never thought of doing this. I always thought, you'd use your terrain paint on the ground or around certain rock features, but you would never put it behind it. But in doing so, you'd pull your terrain back up, and it actually helps to marry the rock with the terrain, creates a more unique photo. So I was quite happy with that. I think I took away some learnings, and I'm still areas to grow, but I gotta say, definitely a huge improvement. I also really wanted to have some type of water feature in the background. And I'm a huge fan of not necessarily utilizing water spouts and things like that. Water, if we can avoid it, we don't really want to have that type of stuff within the habitat. We want to really emulate nature as much as possible. And when it comes to giraffes, they are quite majestic. We really want to kind of provide a unique experience for them. So we went with a waterfall feature in the background, and I think the waterfall feature really seals the deal for this overall exhibit. I think it becomes an easy focal point. Your eyes are always not going to draw to this point. It's off in the distance, so it's going to draw guests in, and that's the goal. Now, I know that my building in the past has been a little haphazard. And what I mean by that is we'll start on one thing, we won't necessarily finish it, and we move on to the next. But I've learned my lesson. It's important to stay on task with what you're working on. In this case, we're working on the rock walls. And you can kind of see we're working on our water bed. And we're also going to add in a little bit more from a rock wall perspective. Now, I've learned my lesson. It's okay to copy rock walls. And what I mean by that is you can copy existing rock walls, but you have to be careful about what you copy. If you have iconic features within your rock walls and you copy it too much, it's not going to work. It's going to conflict. It's not going to look easy. You're going to notice the repetitiveness of it. So in the case of our build, I copied a rock wall and forgot to remove the iconic feature. In this case, it was a few pieces that were standing up at angle. And you can notice right away. I actually started a photo with somebody. They're like, oh yeah, you copied that rock wall. So in doing so, maybe work with what you have, break it down, mix and match the pieces together, and you're going to get a little bit more of a unique piece. It's also going to hide the fact that you're copying it because you're adjusting the overall tone, you're adjusting the placement, things like that. It's a great idea to utilize an existing feature that you've spent a lot of time on without necessarily having to go through and rebuild. So it's a cool tip that I definitely picked up in our tutorial video that I was watching. All right, so let's talk giraffes a little bit. So I had a really cool experience a few years back with the Toronto Zoo, which is our closest large zoo located in Ontario, Canada. So they introduced this behind the scenes experience. And this is where you get to meet up with keepers in a really intimate fashion. So in this case, it's usually no more than 5 people. You go behind the scenes, you get to see what goes into a giraffe exhibit or any other animal. There was quite a few to choose from. I was lucky enough to choose the giraffe. And they also get to take you a little bit closer. They don't allow you to necessarily pet or touch the giraffes or any creature for that matter, but they do give you a more hands-on experience. And there's one thing that really stuck with me when it comes to giraffes is the fact that they have a prehensile tongue. And what this is it's a tongue that has, it's quite long. It actually comes in at about 18 inches and it allows them to extend it up and around particular bushes. And the idea behind it is that, over time, plants have adapted. They've, in specifically Africa, these plants have adapted with, growing thorny bushes, things like that. And in order to feed and eat these bushes, giraffes will actually utilize a tongue that will dip and curve around particular aspects of these plants to grasp the leaves and pull them back. And this is what adaptation and evolution has resulted in. It's a really cool idea. Now, on top of that, these tongues will also grab a hold of you and pull you in if you're not too careful. So you have to keep that in mind because you may get a little bit too close and personal with giraffes. Now, we finally finished with the majority of our initial groundwork, and we've moved on to our barriers. Now, I really initially wanted to have a rope barrier. I think a rope barrier just looks really cool, especially mixing it with an animal like the giraffe. I feel like it's an iconic type of barrier that you would want to have. Now, that being said, didn't really work out. Part of the reason why is because straight rope just doesn't look good. Curved rope, the loopy rope that we saw, it's not long enough or it's too long, so it doesn't necessarily look right. There was no happy medium, so I ended up reverting back to our glass feature. Now, there is something that I've done a little different though with this feature. I found these really cool rope piles. We actually used them in the last Oasis Zoo build. We actually used them as a nest for penguins, but they actually go around this piece. And I gotta say, it looks a lot better adding in these rope pieces to kind of just tie it together. It gives it a little bit of added, history and belief when it comes to those posts. That rope is kind of holding that glass in place. I think it worked really well. Now, you need to see a little bit of a jump, and there's a reason for that. This build took a few days to kind of get where we were going. Had a little bit back and forth in terms of inspiration, and I needed to take a few breaks. And sometimes that's great. If you're running into a wall, if you're not happy with what's happening, take a break and circle back. And the issue that I had with this build was actually the giraffe house. I built this a few times and I just was never happy with what we built before I kind of settled on this one. So initially I placed down just a plain generic wall. It was going to be the placeholder. Just wanted to have an idea of how big it was going to look, and then we started working up from there. I utilized these soft white pieces on the top mixed with, I think I went with a limestone bottoms, sandstone bottoms, colored sandstone eventually, to create the overall view and the overall building itself. But I have a newfound respect for people who do put in a lot of time and energy in these large buildings. And because they're so large, and in this case, there's 2 stories minimum, because giraffes are obviously the tallest animal in the wilderness right now. I think they come in at a whopping, I want to say 18 feet tall. So pretty wild. So we needed something a little bit larger, but that also means that there's quite a bit of open space. So had to change things around a little bit and landed up on this particular idea, which is utilizing this New World leaf piece, this leaf wall decoration, and then placing it up against this wall, so it had a little bit of color. And then of course the second story was going to be made out of wood. And I'm quite happy with the overall view. It actually turned out really well. I learned my lesson as well. In this case, we built the interior. We put our decorations on the interior as well as the exterior, so we didn't have to rebuild over and over and over again. But we got an end product that worked out really well. Now, on top of this, of course, because they are a herd animal, we do need to kind of build some pens for them. So we are going to start working on our pen as well to create it a little bit of a nicer, more realistic giraffe house for them. Now, I was trying to look at a lot of inspiration for giraffe houses, and I find that there's not a lot out there. It's very hard to see what kind of goes on in a giraffe house. There's nothing really up close or personal, and it's such a shame considering it's such a unique animal. So in order to kind of break up a little bit of the interior walls, I utilized some plaster pieces and kind of created them as a pillar. Now, we have to treat this entire building as a large warehouse. There's no supporting structures in the center of the building. So everything that we do, all the support structures are going to be placed up against the wall. And that would make sense for us to have these pillars. They're going to help provide that additional support and ensure that we're not going to face any issues with the building in the future. So we placed them all around, added them to the front entrance, and then started placing out some additional interior aspects of this. Of course, number one is going to be the gate for the front entrance. Now, this gate is obviously not operational. I would, love to have some things that we put in there, but we planned it out. Now, the second aspect of this building is going to be the pens. We need to do something a little bit different when it comes to pens. They obviously need to be quite large. And there is one thing I learned, and I find really frustrating, which is their hitbox size for giraffes. Apparently, I did not build the building as large enough to support them, and then ended up having to kind of jerry rig everything. So your end product is going to be a little different because we built it after the fact. But really wanted to have this two-tone multi-tier system. So we started off with a cinder block base, added in some plaster on the top, and then added in these bars halfway through. And then I believe I placed some mesh as well. And the idea behind it, of course, is to separate it. If we have too many male giraffes, which in this case are called bulls, they can engage in behaviors. And this behavior is actually called necking, which is they'll use their neck as weapons and they'll slam them back and forth, and they create a crazy sound. So we need to make sure that it's separated in their own individual pens, especially because the herd can be quite large, and we want to make sure that obviously their health and well-being is our number one concern. So we ended up utilizing these pens as they are. Now, these pens are actually not large enough. And that's what I was kind of alluding to this. The hit boxes were too small. So we had to adjust them. But I'm actually really happy with how it turns out. Now, the only downside with this game, and something I haven't really figured out yet, is how we can kind of incorporate power lines. And I need to figure out how we can incorporate power lines, because I think having power lines within these pens would, seal the deal. But we're starting to work on the gate that's going to slide. And we utilize some pretty cool features to kind of get what we want. In this case, we have some wheels, and I placed them on these girder pieces and kind of act as a track. And then it actually looked quite nice from a distance. And as do most things. The high end details are not necessarily there. We're focusing more on the low end details, but it actually looks really nice, and I'm quite happy with what we achieved here. Now, with the pens completed, it's time for us to move on to our backstage area. Of course, we need to have a keeper's hut. We can't have the keepers running from one side of the zoo to the other. It's not conducive to a good work environment. So we added that in, and then we started working on some unique features for this backstage area. Now, giraffes are primarily herbivores, which means that they really eat fruits, leaves, flowers, and whatnot. So I added in this hay bale, utilizing a thatch roof piece, and then I placed some of the marquee pieces to kind of create like a ratchet strap that would hold the hay together. Now we've kind of created our own little hay bales, and I think it's actually a pretty cool feature. Now, it's not mine. I was actually watching a video on another zoo, and they showed a build about this, so I tried my hand at building it myself, and I'm quite happy with the overall end result. It's a nice little hay bale style system. Now, on top of that, I also wanted to create a little table to kind of prepare food and stuff like that. And again, I can't take credit for the idea, but I tried my hand at building it. Now, the idea of always building my own things just to help improve skills overall. We never know what we can do until we kind of start building it. So started off with this base framework and added in some chipboard, things like that, and then utilized the tile pieces to create this surface tabletop. Never thought of utilizing tiles in this manner, and I'm actually floored that we never did. It's such a really cool, unique piece. Now, we utilized a lot of the conservation pieces as well to kind of fill in the gaps, and it came together quite well, and I'm actually really happy. It's actually probably one of my favorite pieces that we've built so far. Now, because the giraffes are herbivores, added a lot of fruit. Now, I know we're not going to feed them, potatoes and stuff like that, but you just have to imagine, we don't have a whole lot. Same for pumpkins. We're not going to feed pumpkins to our giraffes, but it's a placeholder for now. Now, we also wanted to add in a few additional items. We unfortunately would have to support with mucking out the stalls, things like that. So we added in a little rake, a little shovel, some additional wheels for our barrels, things like that. And it kind of brightened it together and kind of gave it a little bit of a really cool, unique feel. And I'm really happy with this overall table, and it came together quite well. Next, it was kind of time to finish the walls and copied over some pieces. Now, unfortunately, the New World metal piece doesn't quite fit around the door, so we kind of had to make do. I also added some additional beams on the outside. This helps to provide additional support for our giant warehouse style building. Now, we are approaching the end of our overall speed build. You're going to notice a few things in the live tour that didn't necessarily make it into the build. And the reason why is because we have soliciting feedback. Part of the joy of, Planet Zoo is creating this community where we can seek advice and feedback on what we're building. And some of the feedback that came back through were minor details that really kind of brought it all together. So you're going to see that in our live tour, and I will definitely go over all of that. Now, one of our last interior builds, of course, is going to be this door. Now, this large sliding door is going to act as a way to separate our interior and exterior habitats. And the reason for this is to allow our keepers to interact with giraffes in a safe, contained environment, but also to maintain and clean up the exterior environment as well. Now, speaking of exterior environment, I actually found these vertical slat roof pieces that once I pivoted and adjusted, they act as a great, fun little barrier that's going to prevent our giraffes from going into these corners. Now, there's a few reasons for this. The one corner, it's very easy for them to escape. And in the alternative corner, we just have some additional room that we want to necessarily kind of hide and control. Now, the final aspect that you're going to see in our speed build is going to be these sunshade towers for our giraffes. And there's a few reasons for this. The temperature that we're in right now is actually still too warm for our giraffe. We are in a desert environment. It's about 4 to 5 degrees too hot for them in the sun. So this is going to provide some natural cover for them to utilize. Now, I'm really excited to show you this before and after photo. And I think from a bird's eye view perspective, you can see quite a bit of work has gone into improving the area. And this giraffe exhibit takes up quite a bit of space. But let's dive right into our live tour so you can get a better idea of what we've accomplished today. Now, you've seen the bird's eye view of our exhibit, but it's time for the guest's eye view. And as we come in to Savanna Heights, which I'm really happy with the name, I feel that the giraffes, they belong on the Savanna. And of course, they are the highest animal. We have our little entrance plaza. Now, this entrance is supported by 4 reward statues, creating our own little giraffe herd, pointing us in our right direction to go see the rest of the exhibit. We do have a few custom education boards set up. Ideally, the bottom would have some fun facts about our giraffes, while the top will serve as a little screen, and then we can kind of see the rest of the exhibit. Now, this is what I was meaning by utilizing the sunshades as a way to support some fun little aspects. In this case, we have our food enrichment item as well as our food towers. Now, you'll notice in our food towers, we've added some bushes at the bottom to kind of fill it in a little bit, give it a little bit more of a realistic, always full feel. And of course, how can we not talk about our little water feature that we've created? Oh, look at that, perfect timing. We have a giraffe coming out for a little drink, which is always nice to see. But this is my favorite feature of this entire exhibit. I think it fits in really well, and we've added some additional greenery. You can see quite a bit has changed from the speed build. And I do apologize, a lot of this was built after the fact, had a little light bulb moment there where I really wanted to kind of go back and readdress some things. I'm really happy with what we've achieved here. But this view is just magnificent, seals the deal for, why we did all of the work. Now, as we turn around, we'll see an additional custom billboard with some additional facts about the giraffe, as well as some conservation boards. Of course, our zoo is focused on conservation tactics, so we really want to make sure that we're taking care of that education aspect. Now, the other thing I'm really excited about is, of course, this custom built sunshade. We've tied it into our barrier walls. Makes sense, in fact, to utilize existing infrastructure to build our sunshade. And I've created this nice little curb as well to hide some of the sand and fill in that space just a little bit. I'm really quite happy with what we've accomplished here. It looks nice and clean, and I think it's a nice modern mixed with African architecture feel. Now, as we circle around, you're going to see another sunshade. Same idea, we've tied it into the rest of the barrier just to give our guests a little bit of relief from the sun. If I'm not mistaken, it's currently sitting at about 44 degrees Celsius, which is a little too warm for the majority of us. And again, we have this amazing view of two of our giraffes that are just hanging out. I apologize, 3 giraffes just hanging out. Of course, we are trying to grow our own herd. If I'm not mistaken, we do have, and you saw the tail flick, we have a little baby giraffe just hiding right there, just a little off to the side. I don't know if we'll see them come out, but they are there. We are growing our herd, which is always the goal of our entire zoo. Now, as we circle around up to our hidden viewing point, we have one more education board, same as the other side, just tying it all together. I gotta say that the overall board just looks so much better than what we have in our other exhibits, and it may mean that we do need to go back and revisit all of our other exhibits to update those education boards. Now, as we go up, we did utilize the pre-existing banisters to support this walkway, but as we come into the new walkway, you can see even more has changed. Of course, we have that same theme with wood mixed with more modern style architecture, but it provides an amazing top-down view for our guests so they can see as much of the giraffe as possible. Again, such a majestic animal. You gotta love them. You can't go wrong with what we see here. Now, I did place a dead tree here. I think this actually makes sense. As the zoo expanded, we've created a new viewing area. We would want to, remove this tree to ensure that we have clear line of sight. This would help both of our guests and our keepers to ensure that our giraffes are being taken care of. Now, we are going to jump down into the exhibit to take a little bit of a better look within the giraffe house, as there are some few changes that we need to go over as well. Now, as we hop over, we are utilizing the free look mode, as for some reason, we can't necessarily travel around in here on foot. I don't know why, but it's a little annoying. And of course, we have our baby giraffe just hanging out, hiding in the corner. Seems to be a little shy, and that's okay. Hopefully soon we'll have some new giraffes to add to our herd. Now, you're going to notice a few things here. Of course, our stalls have increased in size significantly. And I think I alluded to this earlier. The hitbox just was not quite enough for what we needed. So we've had to adjust and fix that up just a tad more to get it a little bit easier. So now they are able to traverse into their little pens. They are not all the same size, if I'm not mistaken. I think they vary in size, but I think it still does the job that we need. We've also added a few enrichment items within the exhibit as well to ensure that our giraffes, even when they're penned up in here overnight, things like that, they'll be able to kind of go out and interact. And of course, we have these feeding boxes up on the walls so that they can get a quick snack to eat while they're alone or waiting for keepers to do some enrichment items, maybe some cleaning, vet checks, things like that. Now, as we roll around the other side, you can see we've also added a second story to our overall exhibit. So we are going to take a quick look at the second story. Now, I'm really happy. Ooh. Oh, there we go. A little janky. I'm really happy with what we've achieved here, though. Now, the idea behind this is that staff would be able to come up to this second story. They'd be able to look down. They may be able to reach over, provide some, a feeding enrichment, to our giraffes. And now on top of that, it allows them to work with vets. Now the way it would work is we would have staff on the top. They would distract the giraffe as they're working, and the vet on the bottom would reach through the fence. They may do some initial checkups, things like that, while at the same time ensuring that the giraffe feels comfortable and happy. So this is all in an effort to ensure that their giraffe is always going to be taken care of and in a healthy and whole status. Now, in order to support this second story, while it is not actually traversable, we are going to go with the idea that there is a stairway built into this little column right here. In fact, it is actually hiding our water purifier, but nobody needs to know that. So they'll come up here. We have some additional hay, so that allows them to kind of feed the giraffes. And then, of course, we have another feeding station over here. What is a backstage area without broken down cardboard boxes. So we have a plethora of broken down cardboard boxes ready to be removed as soon as possible. But that is it. Welcome to Savanna Heights. I'm actually really happy with how this build turned out at the end. I was a little hesitant initially, wasn't really happy with what we've achieved, but I think these added details have really sunk it through. Of course, I'm always looking for your feedback. Feel free to share feedback, comments, thoughts on the build, whether good or bad. This lets me know that I'm doing a good job, or it helps me to improve and become better at building Planet Zoo. That has always been the goal, which is to help others improve as well as myself when it comes to the builds. And they are getting much more extravagant given the time. Of course, feel free to subscribe as well. No pressure if you don't want to, but it does let me know I'm doing a good job, and it helps the channel grow as well. And I would be very appreciative. Now, until next time, in our future build, I just want to say, ciao for now.